The rain poured down in thick, heavy sheets, drenching everything in sight. The sky, a deep, brooding gray, stretched endlessly over the city park where Luciano ran every morning. It was a routine he never broke, a ritual as much for his mind as for his body. But today, something was different. As he jogged along the familiar path, his shoes splashing through shallow puddles, he noticed a small figure huddled beneath a tree, shivering. A capybara. Luciano had seen them before. He had even admired them from a distance. But capybaras were skittish creatures, always scattering at the slightest movement. Yet, here was one, curled up tightly, desperately seeking shelter. Without thinking, he slowed his pace and instinctively tilted his umbrella just enough to shield the little creature from the relentless downpour. For a moment, time seemed to pause. The capybara lifted her head, her deep brown eyes meeting his. There was no fear, no rush to escape. Just a silent understanding between two souls caught in the storm. And then, as quickly as the moment arrived, it passed. The capybara stood up and with one last glance, scurried off into the bushes, disappearing as if it had never been there at all. Luciano exhaled, a bittersweet smile forming on his lips. He had no reason to believe he'd ever see her again. After all, she was a wild animal, and he was just another passing figure in her world. The next morning, under the golden embrace of the rising sun, Luciano returned to the park, as he always did. His thoughts drifted back to the capybara from the day before, though he knew better than to expect anything. But as he neared the bend in the path, there she was, waiting. She stood a few feet away, unafraid this time, watching him with curious eyes. Luciano slowed down, his heart hammering in his chest, unsure of what to do. Slowly, cautiously, he knelt down and extended his hand, palm open. The capybara sniffed the air, took a hesitant step forward, and then another. And before Luciano could even comprehend what was happening, she pressed her head gently against his palm. From that day on, a bond formed between them. He started calling her Sai, a simple name, but one that suited her perfectly. Every morning she would be there, waiting for him, eager for scratches and gentle affection. The other capybaras in her group remained wary, but Sai had chosen him. She had trusted him. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The people in the park took notice, whispering among themselves about the man who had befriended a capybara. Some smiled at the sight, warmed by the unlikely friendship, while others simply shook their heads, dismissing it as nothing more than a wild animal tolerating a human's presence. But Luciano knew better. He could feel it in the way Sai would nuzzle against his leg, the way she would sit beside him, completely at ease. Then, one crisp autumn morning, something changed. As Luciano approached their usual meeting spot, he saw not one, but 3 capybaras waiting for him. Sai wasn't alone. 2 tiny, wobbly baby capybaras stood beside her, their fur still slightly damp from the morning dew. Luciano froze, realization washing over him in waves. These weren't just any babies. They were Sai's pups. His chest tightened, his breath catching in his throat. She had trusted him enough to introduce him to her babies, to let him into her world in the most vulnerable way possible. Slowly, he lowered himself to the ground, giving her space, showing her that he understood the gravity of this moment. Sai didn't flinch. She simply watched him, her expression soft, knowing. Over the following weeks, Luciano became more than just a friend to Sai. He became a part of her family. The pups, initially hesitant, grew accustomed to his presence. They would waddle after Sai as she trotted up to him each morning, watching intently as he scratched behind her ears. Eventually, they too began to trust him, playfully nibbling at his shoelaces and rolling onto their backs in the grass beside him. Luciano never could have predicted this. What had started as a fleeting moment in the rain had transformed into something so much greater. He found himself caring for them in ways he never expected, bringing them fresh fruits, making sure they were safe, and simply sitting with them, watching the world pass by. But the world isn't always kind. Not everyone saw the beauty in their bond. Some park visitors complained, arguing that wild animals should remain wild, that humans had no place forming attachments with creatures that belonged to nature. Others warned him, saying that one day Sai and her pups might disappear, that it was inevitable. Luciano wrestled with these thoughts late into the night. He knew Sai wasn't his pet. She was free. She belonged to the world. But did that mean their connection wasn't real? Did it mean he should turn away, pretend it had never happened? One day, he found his answer. He arrived at the park as usual, but Sai was nowhere to be seen. His heart pounded in his chest as he searched for her, calling her name in a whisper, hoping, praying. And then, he saw her. She was by the water, her pups nestled beside her, basking in the warm glow of the afternoon sun. She looked at him, as if she had been waiting. And in that moment, he understood. Their friendship wasn't about ownership, wasn't about control. It was about trust, about respect, about two very different beings choosing each other day after day. Luciano's story is a reminder that love, in its purest form, knows no boundaries. It doesn't care about species or expectations or the limitations others try to impose. It simply exists, waiting to be found in the most unexpected places. And perhaps, one rainy day, when you least expect it, you too will find a friend in the most unexpected of places. Maybe a stray cat will follow you home, or a bird will land beside you on a lonely bench. Maybe, just maybe, a capybara will seek shelter under your umbrella, just as Sai did. If this story moved you, consider supporting wildlife conservation efforts. Every creature, big or small, deserves a world where kindness and trust can flourish. And if nothing else, share this story. Because sometimes all it takes is one connection to change everything.